how great a source is China now of demand for coffee?
Well, you were looking at the coffee market 20 years ago, you didn't even have to think about China. Even 10 years ago, China was not even on the top 15 consumers. Today is the 7th largest consumer. This is from a country that has been always, almost synonymous with tea consumption. China now is a big factor in the coffee market. It's not the main reason why coffee prices for robusta, that's the cheaper bean, are the highest in 45 years. That's mostly weather in Vietnam, but it's increasingly a factor in the market and a factor that we need to consider.
Javier, how much of this is about the fact that it's a cheaper bean, that it's not the expensive stuff that, people who can afford it will keep paying up for?
Well, it is a factor. I mean, let's look at the fundamentals of the robusta coffee market. The biggest producer is Vietnam. It has suffered with a heat wave, drought, so that has been denting production. And we saw roasters of coffee last year. They were very aware that we were living on a cost of living crisis, that consumers were going to probably trade down and try to get cheaper alternatives. So the demand from the roasters for robusta beans went up in expectation that there would be more consumption for it, and expecting that the supply was going to be there. Then the supply was not there because of Vietnam, and that's the combination, that increase in demand coming from the roasters, expecting that the need for a cheaper blend, and then the supply failure, the crop failure in Vietnam.
Well, usually it's the demand mechanism that sorts this kind of thing out, Javier, that it's really expensive now. So you get someone like a Starbucks where people are less willing to buy their fancy coffee drinks, so therefore they're not selling as much, they're not buying as much. But you mentioned the big issue here is the supply issue. Do we need to start thinking about these soft commodities in a very different way, considering what climate change has done in terms of storms and extreme weather?
I think that we need to think about soft commodities as being always exposed to weather. Coffee in particular has been particularly exposed not to heat waves and droughts, but mostly to frost in Brazil. We have big frost in the 70s that really damaged the crop. In one weekend, at what point in the mid-70s, we lost half of the crop of Brazil just because we have a big frost, and that was it. But I think that we need to see these commodities as areas where the demand continues to increase, where the elasticity of demand to prices is very low. We are going to still consuming a cup of coffee every morning, almost no matter what the price is. And where, let's be honest also, the price of the commodity makes a very small fraction of what we pay on the Starbucks. That's a lot about salaries, a lot about marketing, a lot about the profit margin. It's very little of that, whatever it is today on the Starbucks. Every time I visit New York, I'm really shocked by the price of a coffee in New York. That has very little to do with the price of coffee in the market.